Once again, survival horror drags us into facing our worst nightmares as we fight to stay alive long enough to see a new dawn. Good day everyone, my name is True Warrior and today I'll be talking about Resident Evil Vendetta. On May 27th of 2017, the company Mars Animation Planet, in collaboration with the publisher Kadokawa, released the third installment in this franchise's animated films, Resident Evil Vendetta. For this project, Takanori Sugimoto was chosen as director due to his experience directing action movies, while Makoto Fukami was in charge of writing the script. Now, many years ago, when I began my personal journey into the world of survival horror, I found about the existence of the Resident Evil animated movies. And yes, I know I should have started with Resident Evil Degeneration to respect the chronological order, but I said, you know what? Vendetta has Rebecca Chambers, my favorite character in the franchise, and I simply couldn't hold back. For quite a long time now, I wanted to talk about this movie, mainly because over the years, I've noticed a huge part of the community has absolutely trashed on it. And even though I agree that the film made several pretty questionable decisions within its story, at the same time, I also believe that Vendetta did things that, personally, not only caught my attention, but also things that neither the games nor other animated movies have done. And that is exactly what I want to talk about today. As always, I'll be covering both the plot and my personal opinions about it. And as usual, if you haven't seen it, I recommend continuing at your own risk because this video will contain spoilers. So without further ado, let us begin. The story begins in a forest in Querétaro, Mexico, where Chris Redfield, a member of the BSAA, along with Mexican army soldiers, head toward a mansion in search for Agent Cassie White, who, along with her son Zach, were taken hostage by the antagonist of the story, Glenn Arias, a former CIA agent who, after the fall of Tri-Cell Neon Umbrella, began trafficking and selling biological weapons on the black market. Due to his background, the United States government decided to eliminate him by launching a bomb on the day of his wedding with his wife Sarah. The explosion killed everyone present except Arias himself, Diego Gomez, and Diego's daughter Maria. After losing absolutely everything, Arias swore revenge against the entire world. Back in the present, the Mexican helicopter arrives at the mansion and they begin searching for Cassie and Zach. However, the military is attacked by Zach, who is now zombified. Several soldiers are devoured while another gets infected and attacks Chris, who ends up killing him as a result. Meanwhile, the squad captain requests a helicopter to evacuate the building, but the zombies appear and bite him. As he orders his men to evacuate the building, their bodies are shredded by cables. As the last survivor, Chris escapes through a window where he comes face to face with Arias. The two confront each other directly, but Chris is defeated when he gets knocked out by a shotgun. Although his vest protects him, he is still injured by the impact. Arias reveals a zombified Cassie who, according to him, was infected using his biological weapon design, which allows him to distinguish which infectant can kill and which cannot. As Arias retreats along with Diego and Maria, who are now mutated, Cassie and a horde of zombies slowly advance towards an injured Chris, who is saved at the last second by a Mexican army helicopter, which eliminates Cassie and the horde in the process. Devastated by the loss of both his unit and Cassie, Chris swears revenge against Arias. 4 months later of the events in Querétaro, Rebecca Chambers, who, after obtaining her doctorate in virology and biohazard stage, is now working as a professor at the University of Chicago. There, along with her assistant Erin, is developing a vaccine to combat a new virus that had begun spreading rapidly across the United States. I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record repeating the same thing, but bruh. It's impossible to deny how incredibly cute Rebecca looks in this movie. Her face, her hairstyle, her lab coat, the glasses, and that coffee with chocolate chips and whipped cream always in her hand. 10 out of 10 for me, man. In fact, her love for this drink, something Erin questions since coffee isn't a dessert, also carries over into Vendetta's sequel, Resident Evil Death Island. Another detail I loved about her design is that they respected the main colors of her outfit she used during her time in Stars, especially the green, white, and red. In order to advance the synthesis of the vaccine, Aaron informs Rebecca about the imminent arrival of several infected bodies that could serve as samples. However, since the students are off campus and no staff is available to receive the corpses, Rebecca asks Aaron to handle the samples, even though he initially disagrees. As he heads towards the morgue, Aaron notices an open ventilation duct, but before he can investigate, he is ambushed by Maria, who attacks him and knocks him unconscious. At the same time, Rebecca manages to complete the vaccine synthesis and distributes the sample into several syringes. However, during the process, the main power of the laboratory suddenly shuts down, triggering an emergency lockdown. Taking advantage of the situation, Maria releases the virus through the ventilation system, infecting the laboratory staff and turning them into zombies, except for Rebecca. Realizing what happened, Rebecca leaves her laboratory and rushes to the vaccine synthesis room, where she injects herself with the newly created vaccine just in time, preventing her own zombification. When she exits the room, she finds Aaron, who has already been infected and turned into a zombie. With no other choice, Rebecca is forced to end Aaron's life by hitting him with a fire extinguisher. After this unfortunate event, a horde of zombies begins advancing towards the hallway, forcing Rebecca to hide in another lab. However, one zombie manages to reach her and she defends herself by stabbing it in the brain with a pair of scissors. Just before the horde can surround her, Chris Redfield and his squad, the Silver Daggers, break in to rescue her. Relieved, Rebecca thanks them with a thumbs-up gesture, marking the end of the nightmare of the university campus. Inside a hotel, Chris explains to Rebecca the details of his pursuit of Gwen Arias and how, upon learning that the lab where she worked was the most advanced in the country, he decided to meet her in order to warn her about the attack. However, now that Rebecca's research has fallen into enemies' hands, Chris begins to suspect that Arias will modify his biological weapons to make her vaccine obsolete. In response, Rebecca reveals a key discovery. The virus genome presents similarities with Las Plagas, the parasite used by the cult known as Los Iluminados. With this in mind, Rebecca and the Silver Dagger squad travel to Colorado to look for Leon S. Kennedy, who has direct experience fighting Las Plagas during the incident where he rescued Ashley Graham. To both Chris and Rebecca's surprise, their encounter with Leon doesn't go as expected. They find him drunk and completely unwilling to cooperate. After losing his entire squad during a bombing in Washington, directly caused by betrayal from within its own brigade, Leon refuses to get involved in the fight against Arias. Chris tries to talk sense into him, but Leon remains firm. The discussion escalates quickly into a verbal confrontation, which is eventually interrupted by Rebecca. This part catches my attention because after Chris went through the same thing in Resident Evil 6, when Pierce Nivens pulled him out of the hole after Chris lost his own squad, I was surprised by the lack of empathy from Chris towards Leon. The Resident Evil 6 reference is clearly there, but I feel like it could have been handled better than just a screaming match between them. Anyways, after Rebecca calms the situation, she explains to both Chris and Leon that Arias' virus has already infected everyone and remains latent until something triggers the transformation. Meanwhile, the place is being secretly monitored by Glenn Arias, who orders Maria to kill everyone and capture Rebecca, who seems to be of special interest to him. Shortly after, Patricio, whom Leon blames for the death of his unit, bursts in to warn them that his wife and daughter had been kidnapped by survivors of Los Iluminados. According to Patricio, they are collaborating with Arias to create a biological weapon intended to attack the United States. Leon demands information about Arias in exchange for helping rescue his family. However, before Patricio can respond, a van violently crashes into the scene. Several soldiers step out alongside Diego Gomez, who fires a heavy machine gun without mercy. During the attack, Patricio is severely wounded and ultimately dies from bloodlust. To Chris's horror, when he looks outside, he realizes the assault was nothing more than a distraction. While everyone was focused on the attack, Rebecca was kidnapped. Determined and unwilling to give up, Chris turns to Leon to ask once again for his help. In a hidden space in the real world, Rebecca wakes up inside a room decorated like a wedding reception wearing a wedding dress. Arias enters and reveals that the boxes placed on the chairs contain what remains of his friends and family, whom he has partially revived thanks to the anomaly virus, also known as the A virus. Rebecca reveals her research and explains that there are 3 strains of the virus. The first, being the Latin, has spread throughout drinking water lakes and is not dangerous on its own except for random activations. The second, being the Trigger, is an airborne strain dispersed as a gas that causes zombification. And the third acts as a vaccine, allowing infected individuals to avoid transformation. Upon this, Rebecca's explanation leaves Arias deeply impressed.
Nicely done, Professor.
Arias then reveals a photo of his wedding with his fiancée, Sarah, who strongly resembles Rebecca. Wanting to recreate the wedding, the arms trafficker proposes to Rebecca, threatening to infect her with the A virus and ordering her to accept, or else. Rebecca refuses to marry him, so he sends her to his laboratory to infect her. Meanwhile, Leon and Chris discover that Arias plans to release the lightning virus across New York throughout the city's drinking water trucks. They also discover that there is a contingency. Arias' own vaccine can be dispersed across the city to immunize the zombies and restore control of their bodies. In New York, Arias orders the attack to happen immediately in the Great Lakes. The trucks drive through the city, park in designated locations, and release the trigger gas into the streets, turning the people who drink the mineral water into zombies. Now, with Rebecca's vaccine already injected into their bodies, the Silver Daggers squad splits into 2 groups. Leon, Chris, and Damien are tasked with locating and neutralizing Arias' water trucks. On the other hand, DC manages to destroy one of the vehicles by shooting it from the helicopter, leaving Maria unconscious from the impact. Meanwhile, Leon destroys another truck using a grenade, and after the explosion, Arias' agents notice the intervention. However, Damien acts immediately and eliminates the attackers before they can react. While inspecting one of Arias' vans, Damien is ambushed and brutally killed by a pack of zombie dogs. Because of this, Leon decides to distract the creatures by killing them on the highway in the dumbest way possible. Okay, let's review what happened here. So this man decides to go on a highway to kill these 2 dogs, and because of the corpse of one of them, 2 cars go flying through the air, meaning both drivers are probably dead. Then he uses one of the road signs to kill the other dog. And after that, he pulls out a grenade and throws it behind them, causing even more collateral damage and possibly killing the driver whose car was passing through the explosion. Like, for what exactly? But hey, I'm sure because he saved his daughter, President Graham forgives everything since Leon is his golden boy. Anyway, after Leon unnecessarily killed this poor citizen, Chris separates from the group with the goal of rescuing Rebecca. To make things worse, Arias warns Chris that he has 20 minutes before the virus takes control of Rebecca's body. But when Chris reaches the laboratory where she is being held, he is stopped by Diego, whom Chris easily defeats by burning him with a grenade. Chris then frees Rebecca and they head towards the rooftop, but are intercepted by Arias, who ends up fighting Chris. And ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present to you the greatest pistol choreography in cinema history. I'll have to admit, the first time I saw this scene, I laughed so hard that I completely lost track of what was happening. The fight gets so absurd that they end up shooting at point blank range, missing every shot despite being right in front of each other. And then when everything seems lost for Chris, maybe I'm crazy, but it feels like he remembers The Lion King because, just like Simba and Scar, he throws Arias off the skyscraper roof. And despite falling from what I guess is around 9 meters high, for some reason Arias is still alive. Like, how is that even possible? Anyways, after Arias demonstrates Newton's second law, Diego, who is still alive, releases the final stage of his mutation by fusing with Arias' body, turning both into a single tyrant. With this new strength, Arias manages to overpower Chris, until Leon arrives just in time on his motorcycle to save the life of the boulder-punching asshole. While Chris rushes to locate the vaccine in order to inject Rebecca, Leon distracts Arius by confronting him directly. The fight reaches the point where Leon is almost killed by Arius, but things shift when the Silver Daggers intervene. Nadia shoots Arius in the shoulder, and at the same time shoots like 5 buildings with who knows how many citizens inside, freeing Leon and giving him the chance to escape. Arius then leaps towards the helicopter, severely injuring Nadia with his retractable claws in the process. Without hesitation, Leon accelerates his motorcycle and drives it straight into Arius, embedding it into his body and causing an explosion after shooting it. Even so, Arius proves resilient, using his claws to cling to both the skyscraper and the helicopter, refusing to fall. That's when Chris arrives with a grenade launcher and shoots Arius directly in the heart, ending his life. With Arius out of the way and the vaccine finally in hand, Chris is finally able to free Rebecca from the A virus. Once the entire team reunites, the Silver Daggers use the aircraft to disperse the vaccine across all of New York, putting an end to the outbreak. However, in the final moments of the story, it is revealed that Maria survived and swore revenge for the deaths of Arius and her father Diego. Visually, the movie looks spectacular to the point where there are scenes where the characters look almost too realistic. As for the supporting characters in the story, starting with the BSAA members, there isn't much interaction shown with them except for that scene inside the plane, when they talk with Rebecca about her decision to dedicate herself to science, and when the conversation takes a funny turn when Chris mentions that, for the first time in their lives, Damien and DC aren't talking about Breaking Bad.
Hey, I just realized DC and Damien aren't talking about Breaking Bad for once. Hey, don't go there, Chris.
Yo, that shit's ahead of its time.
It's a goddamn masterpiece.
You're goddamn right.
And honestly, if you like Breaking Bad, that's already more than enough for me. Regarding Diego and Maria, there aren't many interactions between the two except for that brief moment where Maria holds Diego's hand before she leaves on her next mission. A simple gesture, but one that shows me real affection between father and daughter. Moving on to the antagonist, Glenn Arias, I have to say he lands somewhere in the middle for me, a 50-50 character. On one hand, I find it interesting that despite not having an intimidating physique and probably having less hand-to-hand combat experience, Arias can fight Chris directly without needing an imitation, of course before fusing with Diego. I also found the concept of a character capable of controlling biological weapons targets at will to be quite interesting. I know some people would say, true, but Buddy already did that similar in Resident Evil Damnation. And that's true, but we can't forget that his case was possibly thanks to the plaga implanted into his rib, which Leon ends up destroying with a gunshot, leaving Buddy disabled. The negative aspect of Gwen Arias is the execution. His motivations for revenge go from being directed at those who killed his loved ones, to wanting to see the entire world burn and become a place where only death exists. This shift feels forced and meaningless, like it comes out of nowhere. On top of that, I don't see the need of Arias' wife to look like Rebecca because apparently it wasn't enough for Misty Chambers to be Rebecca's twin. Now they throw in Sarah, who ironically also resembles her, and that ends up being one of the reasons Arias kidnaps Rebecca. Like, as soon as she rejected you, you didn't just mistreat her, you literally said, you know what, if you won't be with me the good way, then you will as a zombie. I believe Rebecca's kidnapping would have been a much stronger and more coherent motive if it had been approached from a more pragmatic angle. She created a vaccine that represents a direct threat to his business, so he needs her out of the picture. To me, that would have been a far more reasonable trigger, without relying on the forced excuse of, you look like my wife so I need to marry you, which ultimately weakens the narrative overall. As for the protagonist, starting with Chris, I believe that aside from that scene where he starts yelling at Leon, he fulfills his role correctly as the hero of the story. As for Rebecca, for me she is without a doubt the best part of the entire movie. And I'm not saying that because of favoritism, it's because I genuinely love the direction they took with her character. During her time with Stars, many questioned her development, because in Resident Evil 0, we see her fighting biological weapons, but both in Resident Evil and Umbrella Chronicles, there are moments where she's clearly helpless. However, as I mentioned before, unlike other protagonists in the franchise, Rebecca was never conceived as a combat character. I think what they did with her in Vendetta was a very smart decision. If you want to know in more detail what I mean, I invite you to watch my video dedicated to Rebecca Chambers, which I'll leave linked in the description. The only negative point I find about Rebecca is, where does she get the conclusion that the A virus has characteristics similar to what Los Iluminados used? If you look at the enemies that appear in Vendetta, the zombies, the zombie dogs, and both Diego and Arias adopting tyrant-like forms, none of them resemble Las Plagas in any way. That being said, we finally reached what bothered me the most about Vendetta, and I think I might be the only one with this opinion, but I feel like I have to say it. Leon S. Kennedy served absolutely no purpose in this film. The only reason they tried to justify his presence was because he's an expert on Las Plagas, even though he's not even fighting a plaga. If anything, this looks far more like the T-virus. I feel like the only reason they included Leon was to present action scenes and create collateral damage, though for the last part this was mostly Nadia's fault. And I want to clarify, the problem is not Leon as a character, but rather the justification for why he is here. The idea of him going through the same thing as Chris did when he lost his squad seemed interesting, but it had no resolution since Patricio's family ended up being forgotten. In short, while Resident Evil Vendetta gets some things right, presents interesting ideas, and had its funny moments, I feel like it has too many flaws in its plot. But what do you think about Resident Evil Vendetta? I'd like to hear your opinion in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe, and with that being said, True Warrior signs off saying, GG well played.